So the person, thinking in terms of self-improvement, can see not only a personal advantage but a universal advantage. He can perceive the justification, and he can also perceive that the attainment is possible, for others have attained it, and by attaining have become the universal benefactors of mankind. The verses then stress this important practical self-analysis, that the person should use his own life as a constant and immediate text, and by so doing, and using every available amount of reason that he possesses, he must begin to invoke the central part of life. For example, if an individual is utterly confused, and there is no center of integration within him, then obviously the divine part of his own nature is submerged. For deity cannot be confused. Truth and reason cannot be confused. And if man, looking upon a stormy sea within his own psychic life, sees within himself no strength, no hope, no verisimilitude, then that individual has failed, or is failing, to call upon those resources most available to him. He must then gradually restore the dignity of superiors within his own nature. He must do so because he must have leadership. The failure of central leadership means confusion and chaos. Thus he must elevate some principle within himself. And this principle, by whatever name he calls it, is still the personification of the divine attribute. Some individuals in this emergency seek to draw into integration the concept of God, hoping in this to find an inward strength against outward stress. Others may seek to build character or conduct. They may say, at least I will be honest, or I shall try to see good in all things, or I shall place love above hate, or I shall place wisdom above ignorance, or I shall regard the need for the improvement and integration of my own resources. I will put learning above lack of learning. I will put knowledge above lack of knowledge. I will put order above chaos. Whatever we do, whatever decision we make, we must elect from our parts a leader, and that leader must guide us. And that leader must be some phase, value, or quality of good, something strong enough to inspire us to go on. The moment we establish this leadership, many of our troubles cease. Most of our chaos and confusion is overcome. The golden verses state it rather modestly. They say that the individual who has this true internal leadership suffers from a minimum of ills, whereas others have many disasters. This leadership gradually reduces disaster. We may not immediately dispel all of it, but that part which we cannot dispel, we are now enabled to meet and carry with natural dignity. So for man in his various intermediate stages between ignorance and wisdom, we depend upon the leadership of the best in ourselves, and we depend upon reason bestowing patience, bestowing understanding, and making all things a little more useful, so that we are often able to recognize the wisdom and goodness in those circumstances which previously disturbed us. Little by little, through these disciplines, then, we begin the integration of a useful and constructive life. Now, the Pythagoreans imposed the discipline of reason upon the immediacy of conduct in this way. They said that man naturally is responsive to impulse, and that in a moment of emergency, the impulse comes first and the reason comes later. Therefore, it is up to man to remove emergency as far as conceivably possible from his entire pattern of life. Emergency is not as stupendous, tremendous, or inevitable as we think. That which most frequently and easily corrects or prevents emergency is moderation. Nearly all emergency arises from an immoderate situation. Emergency, for instance, arises when we have delayed too long in the use of judgment. Emergency arises when we come into the presence of the unexpected, when in sober truth we should have expected long before. Emergency comes with the impact of a sudden incident, yet there are very few sudden incidents in life. Thus, emergencies may be reduced. There are some which we probably cannot immediately cope with. But the daily emergencies which lead us to the common mistakes, which in turn gather to cause an unhappy life, these emergencies are, most of them, to be easily prevented, easily met, if the individual will use discrimination and will be led by the principle of wisdom within himself. Thus, our life to escape emergency must be, says the verses, the life of moderation. Moderation, for instance, in itself cuts away from us much discord. Moderation in all things will not only assist us to rule our affairs more adequately, but will liberate much of our time from the burden of critical situations. Moderation also prevents those excesses of temperament by which we push matters too rapidly, or also will prevent us from permitting emotion to dominate conduct in a critical situation. Moderation is the reduction of excess. It is the reduction of ambition to reasonable bounds, itself something that will protect health, happiness, and help to strengthen the relations of life. I was talking to a family not long ago in which the family is bankrupt simply because the man of the family is inordinately ambitious. He is so ambitious to attain certain things that he is neglecting life itself for these things. And in all probability, if he continues his present course, he is heading into a nervous breakdown, or he is heading into a heart difficulty. And this ambitious man, who has had no time to live as a father, a husband, and a friend, will probably drop dead in his 50s without ever having achieved the natural good things which life could bestow. Naturally, his attitudes are warped by the lack of social adjustments, and he is a poor person because his ambitions have never been moderated by other values. Always, moderation releases energy from things inferior and dedicates it to the attainment of things superior. Moderation in living reduces the jealousies and envies of our associates. When we try to live beyond our means, we make enemies. We also destroy the trust that people have. And when we become hopelessly in debt, we destroy our own security. By doing all things moderately and reasonably, living in the natural dignity of our kind, and placing the attainment of value above the attainment of things, yet at the same time neglecting no duty or obligation. Thus we become moderate creatures, and through moderation relieve ourselves of a great variety of emergencies. The individual who has all lost his furniture, his automobile, and his house because he could not keep up his payments is a person confronted with an emergency, and we may be sorry for him. but he will continue to have emergency because it is in himself and not in the financing corporation. He has simply failed to be moderate. He has failed to be thoughtful. He has failed to let reason guide his conduct. Therefore, he is in trouble. And as Pythagoras even then pointed out, such men in such emergency curse the gods, failing utterly to see that it's their own mistake. By moderation also, we reduce pressures, and pressures release thought. And where pressures come down to a moderate level, the individual has greater mental leisure. He has greater opportunity to plan. The more emergency-filled his life is, the less energy he has for planning and purpose. And ultimately, he becomes totally absorbed in his desperate effort to adjust to the moment. He lives for the moment and dies in one of those moments. Thus, the disciplines of Pythagoras begin with a very practical situation, namely this placing of a good shepherd, a leader of souls, inside of each person. This shepherd that is kindly to the wayward sheep, and even kindly to the black sheep, the one faculty in us which does not like to get better. And we continue to wander, but the good shepherd and his kindly dog, which is philosophy, for philosophy is the dog of wisdom, helps to bring back the sheep again, and keeps them in the sheepfold, which is the right way and the right place, and is security. Consequently, in all these things, man must become his own good shepherd, watching the flock of his emotions and desires, and making certain that the stray sheep does not fall victim to the wolf of avarice. If he is careful, thoughtful, and loving in these pursuits, he is already tempering himself, beginning to have the possibility of internal experience. For actually, when we put our outer life in order, we free our inner life. We give it an opportunity to do those things and be that thing which is right. Now, as we begin to overcome these weaknesses, we clarify values in terms of internal. We discover that the ways of the internal are more beneficial, more pleasant, more useful than the ways of the external.